I'm only telling you this because I don't know what else to do with it. You ever carry something around so heavy that you start thinking the only way to get any sleep again is to drop it in someone else's lap? That's what this is. If you never believe a single thing on the internet, that's fine. I'm not trying to go viral or scare you for fun. I just need it out of me. And if a few of you listen and skip a certain stretch of highway, or say no to a too friendly invitation, maybe that means what happened to me buys someone else a safer night. This started because I didn't want to be alone on my birthday. My girlfriend had just left. My job had just gone fully remote. And my apartment felt like a storage unit where a human got misdelivered. My best friend Drew, who's the sort of guy that never runs out of solutions because he never runs out of people, said, "Dude, come up to my family's cabin for a long weekend. Back in the sticks, good fishing, 0 cell service so your boss can't bug you. We'll grill something stupid. I'll teach you cribbage. You can let the woods eat your stress." He'd been inviting me for years, and I always had an excuse. Time, work, money. This time I said yes. I needed a change of scenery, and I figured trees and water were cheaper than therapy. His family's cabin turned out to be a real cabin, as in hand-cut timbers, and a porch sagged just enough to make you step carefully. It sat near a lake with a name you'd expect to see on a thrift store oil painting. Mirror Lake or Shadow Pine, something like that. The drive took us through a handful of small towns with more churches than stoplights. We stopped in one with a one-room grocery and one of those bulletin boards with curling paper flyers. Lost dog. Babysitter available. Fresh eggs. And one that read, in big block letters, "Potluck Friday night. New friends welcome." Drew nodded at it, like he was remembering something. "You're in luck," he said, poking my shoulder. "They make a stew that's basically a life reset. Like you can feel your vitamin levels recalibrating." I made some joke about stew not being a vitamin, but he'd already moved on to debating the merits of hickory chips with a clerk who looked like every genealogy project ends up in his face. I only mention the potluck flyer because it'll matter later. If I'd known how much it would matter, I would have set the grocery on fire and driven home. That sounds melodramatic. It's not. It's me trying to describe how much I wish I could do this whole thing differently. The first day at the cabin was perfect, in the simple, dumb way that makes you forget you can be sad. Clouds like scrubbed chalk, water clear as glass, loons doing their weird echoing laughter. We unpacked, took the canoe out, almost flipped it when a turtle surfaced right under my paddle, grilled hot dogs that charred too fast and still tasted like camp. Drew got loud and competitive at cribbage until we both started laughing so hard we forgot the rules. We slept like teenagers. If you've done a weekend in the woods, you know day 2 is when your brain starts to unclench. It is also, for me, when small, stupid details start to feel huge. There was a smell I kept catching because it didn't belong. Not a dead fish funk or the sweet rot of pine needles. This was savory, like slow-cooked meat. It would slip in under the wind and make my stomach growl, and then it would be gone. I mentioned it to Drew while we were uncoiling fishing line. "Someone's got a smoker going," he said, not looking up. "If you smell juniper, it's Cass. She does sausages that make you kind of rethink your life choices." "Who's Cass?" "You'll meet her at the potluck." He said it like, "See? All roads lead to Friday stew." We fished, we paddled, we got a sunburn exactly where you'd predict. On the way back to the cabin, we passed a little cemetery tucked into a stand of birch. You know those old graveyards where the stones are all hand-chiseled and leaning? That, except there were fresh flowers on almost every grave. Not just the recent ones, the older ones too. Some had small bundles of dried herbs tied to the stems with twine. My grandma used to hang sage and rosemary to dry. It looked like that. It looked cared for. I told Drew it was sweet that people in town kept this up. He looked at it and shrugged. Yeah, they take care of their own out here. Then he added, watch your step. The ground dips on the left. It did. He knew because he'd been here 1,000 times. Later, that would keep me up, that small detail, how everyone knew where to put their feet. When Friday rolled around, we cleaned up like we were going to meet parents. Not fancy. Jeans without holes, shirts that didn't smell like the lake. Drew insisted we bring something, and because the grocery stocked mostly shelf-stable mysteries, we brought cornbread mix and canned jalapenos and tried to pretend the casserole dish wasn't borrowed from the cabin's last renters. The potluck was in a building that looked like a town hall, and a church had a very polite baby. White clapboard, flags out front, a bell that looked like it had survived a war. The parking lot was mostly trucks with a couple of dust-coated Subarus. You can judge a place by the ratio of those two vehicles, I think. This one was outnumbering Subarus 5-1. Inside, it smelled like my dad's old camping stove on a Sunday morning, which is a weird way to say seasoned cast iron and coffee. Every table was stacked with bakery sheets of biscuits, bowls of green beans with bacon, deviled eggs so neat they looked like stock photos. The stew was in a huge steel pot set on a heat plate in the middle of the room like a shrine. It was dark brown with a slick of fat on top, the kind that tells you this has not been a vegetarian cookout. "Get the stew and a biscuit," a woman with an apron said as I was hovering. "Then walk around. Introduce yourself." She had forearms like a sculptor. I've never used the word sturdy to describe a person before. It fits here. Her eyes were the color of the lake at dusk. "You're Drew's friend," she said, not asking. "Guilty," I said. "I'm..." She wiped her hand on her apron before shaking mine. Her palm was warm and dry. "I'm Cass," she said. "You stirred this, you served this." Like it was a rule. Like you weren't allowed to eat unless you put your hand in it. She had me take a wooden paddle and sweep it once, twice through the pot. The stew pushed back like it was heavy with something more than potatoes and meat. People were waiting behind me, but no one huffed or made a face. They watched, like it mattered that I did this part right. I don't want to turn this into a food show, but I need you to understand what the stew tasted like so you can maybe understand the rest. It wasn't spicy hot. It was warm in that bone-deep way where everything you've been clenching relaxes. The meat was tender without being mushy. It had that gamey edge like lamb has, or venison. The broth was layered with something I thought was allspice, maybe. There was a hint of smoke. If I hadn't known there were actual chefs in the world, I would have thought this was the best cooking possible. It made me instantly, painfully hungry, in a way that felt a little like grief. Like some part of me had been starving in secret and had finally been fed. "See?" Drew said around a mouthful of biscuit. "I told you." I said a lot of things like, "Oh my God," and "This is insane," and "I could live off this." And people around us smiled in that way small towns do when you get the script right. I don't mean that unkindly. I grew up in a place like this. They just like to see that you appreciate what they've built. People rotated around the stew like planets. I met a kid missing 2 front teeth who solemnly told me he liked the chewy parts. I met an older guy in a baseball cap that said Lucky, who introduced himself as Hank and asked about fishing and told me a story about a snapping turtle. I met a girl named June whose hair was braided like a crown and who said she was a nurse over at the clinic. She patted my arm when I coughed on a pepper flake and told me to drink water, not milk, because milk makes the fat coat your tongue. Half the room had advice for me. I started feeling like maybe moving out here wouldn't be the worst idea. I was on my 2nd bowl when it happened. I found a little hard thing in my mouth. My molars didn't like it. I fished it out with my tongue and spit it, very casually, into my napkin like you do with a bone. It was small and smooth and had a notch in one end. An adult tooth front root can feel like that. But I didn't know that then. I did what anyone would do. I looked into my napkin and then looked around to see if anyone had seen. June had. She glanced into my napkin like you might peek into a baby's diaper and said, "Oh, you got a prize." She reached toward my napkin and paused, waiting for me to hand it over. I didn't move. "It's just a tag," she said, "like the end of a seasoning bundle." She smiled and then frowned when she saw my face. "You okay?" I know there are sensible reactions to an unexpected hard thing in your food. I'm sure some of you would have laughed and flicked it aside. Here's the thing. I didn't feel sensible anymore. I still feel embarrassed admitting that. The stew still tasted good. I was having a good night. But my body had this deep electric reaction like I'd accidentally stepped off a curb and a bus just grazed my shirt sleeve. Not a thought. A jolt. "It's nothing," I said. "Just thought it was a bone." June nodded like, "Fair. We do try to strain it out. Cass, you hear that? We got a bone." Cass, who had been talking with Hank, looked over at me like I'd done something brave. She crossed the room, took my napkin with 2 fingers, and looked inside. Her face didn't change. She folded the napkin and tucked it into the pocket of her apron with this smooth, practiced motion. Not like she was hiding something, like she was collecting something that belonged in a particular place. "Thank you," she said. "You enjoying yourself otherwise?" "Yeah," I lied with my mouth while my hands began to sweat. "It's amazing." My voice sounded too loud. "Good," she said, and that was that. People clapped when an old man played harmonica. I pretended to keep eating. I watched the door in a casual way that was probably not casual. My heart thudded in my ears like a second song. You might be thinking, dude, it was a clove stem. It was a bay leaf spine. Calm down. I told myself that. I told myself that even as I took a walk outside to get some cool air. It was crisp and the sky was pin-pricked over with stars, but my hands shook like I'd chugged 3 coffees. Drew followed me out after a minute and bumped his shoulder into mine. "You good?" he said. "Yeah." I looked at him. He'd grown up around this. I could ask. Question. Shoot. Is there... what's in the stew? He laughed like he'd been waiting for a vegetarian to try to trap him. Meat, potatoes, carrots, broth, the stuff from the herb garden. Cass does her secret mix and everybody else just throws their things in and prays. "What kind of meat?" He made a face like, What is with you? Whatever's good that week. Venison, pork, sometimes beef if someone slaughters. You okay, man? You went pale. I found a thing, I said, in my bowl. A bullet? He said instantly. From the deer, maybe? That happens sometimes. No, I said. And then I said, maybe. He nodded like that settled it. Yeah, don't chew those, he said. And then when I didn't laugh, he frowned. You want to go home? He meant the cabin. I nodded. He clapped my shoulder and said goodbye to a dozen people on the way out, promising to come by for breakfast on Sunday, telling Cass her stew had cured my heartbreak, which made her smile like she'd heard that exact phrase 100 times. On the way back, the dark felt less friendly. It hugged the edge of the road a little too tightly. Our headlights kept catching reflective tacks nailed to trees, which I'd noticed on our way in but hadn't understood. Now they felt like eyes. At the cabin, I tried to brush off my weirdness by blaming the way we'd mixed heavy food with lake sun. Drew seemed content to accept that. He put a beer in my hand and told me to drink half and then switch to water. I went along. We played cards. We didn't talk about the stew again. When I brushed my teeth, I spit brown. I told myself it was from coffee. In the middle of the night, I woke up because something was scratching. Not at the door. Under the floor. It was that specific scuttling scratch of tiny nails on old wood. I lay there and counted. Scratch, scratch, scratch. Then a pause. Then the weight of something larger settling, as if it had crawled through a crawl space and found the warm pipe that ran under the house. I told myself it was a raccoon. Every cabin has a raccoon. I turned over and tried to go back to sleep. Then I smelled it again. That savory, slow-cooked smell. Not strong. Just a ribbon that made my mouth water and my stomach twist. I lay there and inhaled like I could locate it, like a cartoon dog. It wasn't coming from the kitchen. It was coming from under the floor. I will never forgive myself for the next thing I did. I got up. I got my phone, even though we didn't have service, because the flashlight is the one truly noble use of a smartphone. I went outside in bare feet like a fool. The grass was cold and damp, and immediately I wanted to be back inside, but the smell led me like a leash. I walked around the side of the cabin to the little lattice panel where the crawl space was. There was a loose corner. Of course there was. Nothing in my life has ever stayed fully latched. I crouched and lifted it and ducked, holding the flashlight between my teeth with my lips pressed so hard they went numb, because both hands felt safer. The crawl space was less than 2 feet high. My shoulders brushed insulation that had turned into pale, fuzzy felt. I had that sense of air not moving. You know it if you've ever crawled in somewhere small. The oxygen feels used up. Something moved ahead of me. That same scratch like skinny hands. I aimed the light. 2 eyes reflected back blue-white. A raccoon, just like my brain wanted. It stared at me. It didn't run. It didn't hiss. Its paws were black and shiny, and I could see it was chewing on something. Shoo, I tried to say around the flashlight, which came out as a blob of noise and a drip of spit. I moved forward, which was, the word you're looking for is stupid. The raccoon backed up 1 step, and then did the kind of thing animals do that makes you realize they have a world next to yours. It picked up the thing it was chewing and it carried it away from me like it was protecting it. It turned down a long space where the light didn't quite reach. And I, because I am an idiot with a flashlight and a need, followed. About 4 feet in, my shoulder hit a cut 2x4, and I stopped myself with my palm to keep from face planting. I aimed the light down to see where to put my hand, and that's when the beam caught the thing the raccoon was dragging. It was a hand. Not a raccoon hand. Not a doll's hand, which is definitely what my brain tried to call it. It was a left hand, skin on, missing the pinky. I could see the gnawed bone at the wrist. It looked pale and waxy in the light. I don't know why. In that moment, I noticed the chewed nails. Pink polish, chipped. I didn't scream. I stopped breathing, which is apparently my body's first move when faced with nightmare images. The raccoon, annoyed, picked up the hand by the base of the thumb and dragged it through the dust like a dog determined to relocate a trophy. It wasn't scared of me. It was doing a job. I scrambled backwards so fast I smacked my head on the underside of the floor. I got splinters in my palms and knees. The flashlight flew out of my mouth and rattled away. The beam spun and caught other things. A loop of chain, a stained tarp, something that looked like a leather belt but wasn't. I didn't look again. I got to the lattice, flopped into the wet grass, and lay there inventing new ways to breathe. I could taste dirt and fear. I crawled to the porch on my elbows, and then I ran inside and locked the door. Like that matters, when what you're afraid of is under your floor. I woke Drew up. I didn't even try to be cool. I stood in his doorway and said, "There's a hand." It took him a second. He said, "In the lake?" Like we were solving a puzzle. I said, "Under the house." And then I threw up into my cupped palms and everything quit pretending this was normal. He got up fast then, but he didn't run outside. He put his hands on my shoulders like he was grounding a static shock and said, very quietly, "Okay. I need you to take a breath and tell me exactly what you saw." I told him. I told him about the raccoon and the hand and the polish. I told him the smell. He watched my face the whole time, like he was measuring the size of the hole I had fallen in. "Okay," he said again. He wasn't scared. He wasn't angry. He looked sad. "Okay. Put your shoes on." "What?" "Shoes," he said, already moving, grabbing his keys, checking his phone out of habit even though it was a dead rectangle. He grabbed the heavy flashlight from the hook by the door. "We're going to go talk to Cass." "Now?" "Yes." He looked me up and down, like he was checking if I'd shatter if he touched me. "Now." We drove with the windows down even though it was cold, because the inside of the truck felt like the stew smell had soaked into the upholstery. I clutched the handle above the door and watched the dark like it was thick with ropes. The trees back here are tall and close. They make tunnels with their tops. Headlights reach only halfway. We didn't go to the hall. We went to a house near the lake I hadn't noticed before. Lights were on. Not like someone had left them. Like someone was awake. Drew didn't knock on the front door. He walked around the back like he'd done it 100 times and rapped on the mudroom with the base of his fist. The door opened before he could knock a second time. Cass stood there like she'd been standing there waiting. No apron now. Jeans, sweatshirt, hair tied back with a bandana. She looked at me and then at Drew and said, "You should have brought him to me sooner." Something in my chest emptied out when she said that. I didn't even know I was waiting to be told I was crazy until I wasn't. Then I wanted to be told it. I wanted the hand to be a raccoon toy, and the stew to be beef and everything to be laughable. I realized I was shaking so hard my teeth clicked. Cass stepped aside and said, "Come in." Her kitchen looked like my mom's, if my mom had been even better at life. Big farmhouse sink, butter-soft wood counters, jars of dried things with handwritten labels, thyme, tarragon, fennel. A pot on the stove muttered like it was gossiping. Something baked sat cooling near the window. It should have felt safe. I gripped the edge of the table and forced my legs to steady. "He went under the house," Drew said without preamble. "Raccoon got to the stash. He saw a hand." Cass's eyes closed for a second. Not like she was praying, like she was tired. "I'll call Hank," she said. "Are you?" I had to swallow before my voice worked. "Are you going to call the police?" She looked at me. I could feel her measuring whether to let me into the circle. I thought wildly about how I had stirred the stew. I thought of the wooden paddle and felt sick. "We handle this ourselves," she said finally. "If we call them, no one will be here next spring." "Because you'll be in jail," I said. The kitchen swam. Drew's hand on my arm steadied it enough that I didn't fall. "Because you're—" I made a sound that was supposed to be a laugh and wasn't. "What are you?" "Hungry," she said, and then she flinched, like the word had leapt out of her. "That's not fair." She took a breath and set a glass of water in front of me. "We keep people safe," she said. "That's the bigger truth. We do a necessary thing because no one else will." I stared at her. "You serve people at a potluck to keep people safe." She didn't get offended the way you do when someone reduces your sacred thing to a sentence like that. She just looked older. "Do you know what was here before the road?" she asked, voice soft. "Before there were cabins to rent and fireworks over the lake and kids with phones? There were woods and water and a path that things traveled along because that's how animals work. Critter, human, it doesn't matter. They find the easiest line and they walk it, and then their children walk it too. The same way through the trees, the same place to ford the river, the same hollow to sleep in when the snow gets heavy. You think highways are new? We laid them on top of old roads. Every road was here before you. When the road started to draw more people started going missing. Because it's easier to take a person here. Because no one hears when a rabbit screams in the middle of miles of trees." She wasn't being poetic. She was laying out a fact, like telling me the weather. "We learned," she continued, and then corrected herself. "Our grandparents learned that the only way to keep it from getting worse was to build a pit next to the road." "Like a trap," I said, trying to force her to say it wrong. "Like a well," she said, "where the water you draw saves more lives than it takes." She went to the stove and turned the knob a quarter turn to quiet the murmuring pot. "There are bad people. You know this. I am not explaining that. There are worse than bad people, ones who hunt people, who wear faces like ours and walk like us, and who will keep doing it until someone stops them. We stop them. And then, because this place has to live, because winter is long and stores are far, and the money you bring never stretches, because, too, wasting meat is a sin when it's been paid for in blood, because so many becauses you'll get dizzy if you try to hold them all in your mouth, We feed our people during the lean seasons. Drew was still next to me, and I realized he was shaking too, just in a different way. Like he'd shaken before and he was remembering how to do it. "You're a vigilante cannibal jar club," I said, and that finally broke something in the room. Drew made a humiliating snort laugh and then put his fist to his mouth to hold it in. Cass's mouth twitched. "We're what keeps this place from being a headline every spring," she said, and that wiped the half-smile away. "We marked your friend," she added, looking at Drew. "What?" I said. "He's safe," she said simply. "He's been safe since he was 10 and broke his arm falling out of Hank's truck and bled on our floor. We mark our own. We look after ours. That's why I said you should have brought him to me sooner." She looked at me, and her face tightened. "I should have taken your hand when you stirred, but I didn't want to scare you. You found us too fast for the usual path." "The usual path?" I said, hollow. "We feed you," Drew said quietly, like he was reciting something. "We teach you the rules. We show you the photos. We make you choose." "What choice?" I said, and it came out broken. "There's no choice." "There's always a choice," Cass said, like she'd had to say it 1,000 times. "You can tell the state police tomorrow, and they'll come in here with their long guns and their questions and their cameras, and they'll find jars with labels that will make a prosecutor's mouth water. They'll take old men and young women away, and this place will dry up. The road will still be here. The woods will still be here. The thing that hunts will still be here. The trick is, we'll be gone, and it will go back to eating girls who run out of gas and boys who think the county line is where you stop paying attention." She looked at me and didn't look away. "Or you can let us keep doing the ugly thing that keeps you alive." I took a long time to answer. My answer is not a good one. I don't know if I'm even going to say it right. I sat in a neat kitchen with jars of herbs, and a woman who had handed me a paddle so I could stir the community stew, and I tried to picture calling the police. I tried to picture the flash of lights on the lake, the way it would feel when the nice men with their harmonicas and their baseball caps became mug shots. I tried to picture the girls who would drive through here next spring with broken fan belts. I tried to picture the hand with the missing pinky and the pink polish and whatever face it belonged to. I tried to picture the face of the person who had put that hand under my floor. I couldn't. I could only picture the raccoon. I could only picture the stew. "What was in my bowl?" I said finally. "What was the hard thing?" "The wedding ring," Cass said softly. "We try to catch everything, but sometimes..." She spread her hands. "Sometimes we miss. We give them back when we can, to their mothers. That's part of the bargain." "You tell the mothers?" I whispered, horrified. "We ask if they want to know," she said. "Some do. Some want a grave they can lay flowers on. Some want to keep believing their girl went to Florida." I don't remember standing up. I know I was upright at some point because the room tilted and righted itself. Drew was crying. He had his hand over his eyes. He wasn't making any sound. I didn't know what to do with him. I wanted to put my fist through something. I wanted to throw up again, but there was nothing left. "We are not monsters," Cass said. And she said it like she needed me to carry that sentence out of here and put it down somewhere where people could see it. "We are the fence. You know the kind. barbed wire on a hillside to keep the herd from wandering where the ground goes soft. It's not pretty. It's not something you brag about, but it keeps things where they belong. You eat them, I said, and the word eat felt like a trigger, like if I said it too many times the floor would open. You eat people. I was shaking again. You fed me. She didn't flinch. She didn't apologize. I fed you what kept you alive when you slept last night, she said. You shouldn't have gone under the house. I laughed then, a sharp bark that hurt. Sorry. I thought the stew smell coming from the crawl space was a good sign. She actually looked sorry then. It was my fault, she said. I was late to help after the potluck. Hank tucked it under and didn't seal the lattice. She stopped, thought better of whatever she was going to say, and shook her head. I'll go with you. We'll clean it. You'll sleep at my house tonight. The part of me that had been 10 years old once and had fallen off my bike and wanted a mom took that offer and crawled into it like a nest. The rest of me stood there and tried to understand how to be a person in a room where the rules were tilted. You think you know what you will do when you reach the edge of the map. You don't. You only know when your feet slip on it. We went back to the cabin with trash bags and gloves. Hank met us there, his face folded in on itself with shame. He kept saying, "I'm sorry, bud. I'm sorry," like he was apologizing to me for the whole of history. He didn't look like a monster. He looked like a man who had done something nasty that he believed was necessary. And if you haven't looked that in the face yet, I hope you never have to. We crawled under the floor and retrieved what we could. We put it in a cooler with ice like we were dealing with venison. I tried not to cry and failed at least twice. Later, in a room at Cass's house with a quilt that smelled like cedar, I slept like I was hiding in the roots of a tree. In the morning, because the sun had the nerve to rise, I drank coffee that could strip paint and watched a squirrel outside the kitchen window flick its tail and scold something none of us could see. Cass didn't try to talk to me like a therapist. She set a plate with toast in front of me and butter that had been set on the counter long enough to spread easily and said, "You have a choice." "Tell the police," I said. "Or stay quiet," she agreed. "And be careful how you use what you know. It can cut you." I didn't answer. I didn't know how to yet. Drew came in from the porch with his eyes swollen and said, "We'll go home today." "Come back," she said, not as a plea or a threat, just a thing she was laying out on the table with the butter. "Or don't. But if you ever get a call from a number you don't know and it's me, answer. It'll mean the fence fell. Everyone we can save helps hold it until we fix it." I nodded. It made no sense, and it made too much sense. Before we left, she asked me to walk with her to the garden. The morning had that high, thin light that makes edges look sharper. The rows were straight, and the dirt was dark. She knelt and checked the leaves shade by shade. She pointed out a patch of something grayish-white by the fence and said, very matter-of-factly, "That's bone char. It's good for the soil. It gives it back some of what it takes." I had to press my lips together so I didn't say something that would make the air go slant again. I didn't want to keep finding ways to be shocked. My body was tired of the adrenaline. My skin felt too thin. We drove home. I kept seeing the hand in the beam of the flashlight like an afterimage. I washed my sheets. I washed them again. I stopped eating meat for a while because every smell was the stew, and every stew was the hand, and I couldn't separate them. I lost weight. I didn't have to lose. I told my boss I had food poisoning and needed a week. He said, "Because of your birthday?" "Happy belated," I said. "Thanks," and then lay on my kitchen floor because it was cool. I did not call the police. If you were waiting for the virtuous turn, I'm sorry. I did not call the police because I didn't want to be the person who broke it open and sent good people to prison and left the road bare. I told myself a lot of stories about it being complicated. I told myself that if I called, people would die who weren't trying to hurt anyone, and people would keep dying anyway, just in different places. I told myself that what they were doing was a war, not a crime. I told myself that the stew had fed kids and old people through winters, where the power went out for days, and the nearest help was a helicopter that couldn't land because the lake had gone to glass. I told myself so many stories I ran out of breath. Then, about 3 weeks later, I got a text from a number I didn't recognize. "Fence needs hands. Are you home?" It wasn't signed, but I knew. I stared at it for a long time and then called. Cass answered on the first ring. "I'm sorry," she said without preamble. "I wouldn't ask, but the state troopers are dealing with a pileup on 17 and we had one get through." "One what?" "The kind that hunts," she said, very quiet. "We can't find the girl. If we don't find her soon," she exhaled, "you can say no, but if you can get here." I'm not. "No one is," she said, and there was no pride in it. "But you don't run on your birthday, and you didn't tell them, and that means you're already standing where this road goes." I hung up, which is maybe the first thing I've done right in this story. I didn't say yes. I didn't say no. I hung up because my heart had started thudding in a way that made sparks fly in my eyes. I leaned on the wall and slid down until I reached the floor. I stared at the pattern in the wood grain until it stopped moving. Then I got in my car. I know what you're thinking, and you're right. I could have stayed home and pretended not to hear. I could have said, "I don't accept your premise," like a debate team kid. I could have called the police then and told them to send everyone and their dog to a certain set of GPS coordinates. And I could have said, "I have information," and I could have been brave that way. Instead, I drove. Because I had eaten the stew. Because I had stood in the kitchen. Because the world had tilted, and I had tilted with it. And now I needed it to be a complete tilt, or I would fall forever. When I got there, the light was falling, and the air had that feeling before a storm. The road was quiet in the way it is when something has just passed. Cass met me by the old clapboard hall with a shotgun. She didn't bother to hide, and a look that said she'd been awake for too long. He was a man, mid-40s, normal in every way that makes you look past someone. Not a villain with a scar. He wore cheap jeans and a ball cap, and he had a smile that would get you to lower your window an inch if you thought he needed directions. He'd been around 2 days, no longer. He'd asked after the clinic. He'd been in the grocery and paid cash and made a joke about the stew that sounded like flirting. Everyone had clocked him because everyone in town understands the fence. They'd waited to be sure. And then a girl had gone missing. The nurse's cousin, a kid who smuggled beers to her friends by the lake. and told her mom she was sleeping at June's, which was true until it wasn't. And then he was a target instead of a visitor. I learned more that night than I want to tell you. Not because I want to spare you, because I want to spare the version of me who can still sleep. They didn't torture anyone. They didn't do anything you could photograph and make a jury gasp. They tracked. They followed the path he had taken, because people take the easiest line. They used dogs that didn't bark and flashlights with red filters, and they kept their voices low because sound carries over water. They moved like people who had practiced the same dance 100 times, who had learned the corners where you trip. They were organized. It felt like a barn raising, if a barn raising ended with a shovel in a hole. He had her in a half-dug deer blind. She was alive. I want you to hear that sentence the way I do, with the ragged relief that doesn't go away. She was alive and she was gagged, and he was talking to her in a voice that made the hair on my arms lift. He was telling her about a place he'd been that had better weather. He was telling her he was going to take her there. The way he said "we" made me taste bile. I didn't catch him. Hank did, with a quiet efficiency that made me think of my grandpa fixing a fence. He waited until the man stood, and then moved behind him and got the angle right, and then the man slept and didn't wake up. That's what they say. That's what I'll say. It isn't exactly true, but it's true enough that I can look at it without dropping the plate. They took her home. Her mother screamed. Her father cried in that soundless way men do when they've spent a whole day being brave. June wrapped the girl in a blanket and told her the first of 1,000 reassurances. And the man who'd come to take her went in a cooler with ice. I stepped aside and threw up into the ditch, and then threw up again, because my body had gotten used to doing that, and wanted to keep doing things it knew. When it was done, when the fence was stood back up with extra posts, when the girl was sleeping and the men were quiet, and the women were quiet, and even the dogs were resting but alert, Cass stood next to me in the dark and held out a jar. It was empty. It had a label taped to it with a piece of yellowing adhesive. The label said, "For the ones who left." "Put something in," she said, "if you want. A promise, a piece of a shirt, the corner of a map." "I don't belong here," I said, or maybe I asked it. "I don't live here." "You came," she said, not unkindly. "You stirred the stew. That means you're part of it, whether you like it or not. That's how communities work. They trap you with kindness, and then they ask you to get your hands dirty." I took the jar because not taking it felt like putting down a child someone had handed me. I didn't put anything in it. I don't have an object that means I understand. And if I did, I think it would burn my hand. I held it until my fingers left prints on the glass. Then I set it on the step of the hall and walked to my car. Drew didn't come that night. He called in the morning and said, "I couldn't." I said, "Me neither," even though I had. I didn't want him carrying the same weight. He has his own to carry. I think that's how I'm telling myself this is okay, that I can carry some of it so he doesn't have to. That does not make me noble. That makes me complicit. I can hold both those things and let them grind my ribs. If this was a movie, it would end with me wrecking my life to keep the secret. Or it would end with me going to the papers and burning the place down. It doesn't. It ends like this. with me back in my apartment, the plants on the windowsill doing a kind of slow applause, my calendar stacked with Zooms and meaningless deadlines, and my body remembering the smell of stew at weird times, like in elevators, where someone's lunch leaks the same heat. It ends with me buying every vegetarian cookbook I can find and making bland soups that feel like penance. And then, a month later, buying a steak at a grocery store where the meat is wrapped in pink plastic and cooking it in my own kitchen and eating it and not throwing up and crying anyway. It ends with the realization that nothing ends. Not really. Especially not this. I haven't gone back to the cabin. I told Drew I will, that I just need to get my head right, which is one of those phrases people say when they need the conversation to end. I've driven past the turnoff twice. Both times I kept going. Both times I felt the road pull at me like it had a hand inside my chest. You want a moral here? You want me to tell you what you should do if you ever get invited to a potluck where the stew tastes like home and a woman with strong hands asks you to stir. I can't do that. I can only tell you what happened to me and hope you hear the low hum under it, the one that says something like, "The world is held up by ugly things that people do in the dark because they love the light." That's not a comfort. It shouldn't be. You can hate them for it. You can decide they're monsters and leave it at that. Maybe you're right. I keep thinking about the raccoon. This is how dumb I am. This is what my brain landed on. I keep thinking how it picked up the hand and carried it like it was defending something. Like it had a job and I was getting in the way. I keep thinking how normal its eyes looked in my light. I keep thinking how it didn't see a line between the stew and the hand and the bone char in the garden. It saw food and safety and habit. It saw a path it had walked before. Or if not it, then its mother, or its mother's mother. It saw the easiest line through the dark, and it took it. Sometimes I sit in my car in a grocery store parking lot, and I hold my steering wheel very tight because I want to scream. Sometimes I pick up my phone and hover over the number for the state police and imagine how I will tell the story, what I will include or leave out, how I will make myself sound like a reliable narrator. I imagine the questions they'll ask and the questions they won't know how to ask. I imagine them going there and saying, "Ma'am, we have a report." And I imagine Cass looking at the jar with the label, and then at the floor, and then at the sky, and then saying, "Which report? The one about the girl we found alive, or the one about the freezer?" I imagine getting called to testify, and I imagine getting spit on in the grocery aisle by a woman whose baby I kept safe, by the only means anyone had. You think this is a story about cannibals? It is. But it's also a story about how we feed each other. We do it with casseroles when someone dies, and with rides to the airport when someone moves, and with horrible compromises when the road through the trees collects bad men like bugs on a windshield. We pretend the ways we feed each other are pretty. Sometimes they're not. Sometimes they're quiet and awful, and metastasize into traditions like bone char in a garden. I still have the jar. I don't keep it in my kitchen. It's under my bed, which is probably psychologically important in some way I'm not qualified to unpack. The label is peeling up at one corner. Sometimes I press it down. I haven't put anything in it. I don't know what to feed that thing. My therapist, who I have finally started seeing because there's only so much you can dump on your friends before they stop answering texts, tells me that writing this down might help. So here it is. This is me putting something in the jar. Take this how you will. Think about me when you smell stew that tastes like someone pressed pause on your hunger. Think about a woman with tired eyes, and a man with a hat that says lucky, and a kid who calls gristle chewy parts, and a nurse who tells you to drink water and not milk. Think about how many roads are old, and how many fences need hands. If you ever find a little hard thing in your mouth and your teeth don't like it, spit it into your napkin and look down. Decide then. Don't wait until you're under the floor with a flashlight between your teeth and a raccoon looking at you like you're the only one who didn't get the memo. Maybe you'll call. Maybe you'll keep driving. Maybe you'll go in the kitchen and stir. I'm not going to tell you which one makes you a monster. I don't even know. Not really. I just know that somewhere, tonight, someone is tying dried herbs with twine and hoping that what they do will keep the kids on their bus route and the lake free of flowers that sink. If you go, leave your phone in the truck. Not because of cell service, because there are some things you shouldn't try to capture, because a screen turns everything into a movie, and if you do that, you will become a certain kind of person, and I think a smaller piece of you will die. Because the smell will crawl out of your pocket later, and you will think, for one terrible second, that something under your bed is cooking. I still don't know if I'm going back. I keep telling myself no. But you and I both know the simplest things can make you turn a wheel. The way a sentence lands, the way a calendar squares up to a date, the way your best friend texts a single word like, come, and you remember being a kid with your head out the truck window, hair nodding, getting taught cribbage with too much shouting, and everything in you that isn't fear says yes. People call that impulse love when they want it to sound nice. They call it complicity when they want to stab it. I don't have a good word. I have a jar. I didn't want to be alone on my birthday. I got what I asked for. Now I know what the cost is. Now you do too. If you need a clean ending, make one up. Hang me in it, or hang them, or burn the building down. If you want the truth, it's this. The thing that hunts is still out there. The fence is still up. The stew is still being stirred. And sometimes, when I'm walking home late and hear a car slow down, I walk faster because I'm soft and I want to stay that way. And sometimes I turn and look straight in the driver's eyes and let him see my face. And I don't look away because I have seen under the floor and I can't unknow it. He drives on. Most of them do. Some of them don't. That's why the potluck keeps happening. That's why someone keeps a paddle in the kitchen drawer where anybody can reach it. If you ever stir, take a breath first. You'll want it later. I'm not proud of why I said yes. It wasn't curiosity or a sense of adventure or anything noble like that. It was clout, views, the little dopamine drip you get when a bunch of strangers decide you're interesting for 5 minutes. If I start anywhere else, I'll be lying to you and to myself. I run a tiny food account, nothing wild, just decent photos, short reviews, a couple of half-viral reels where I sliced eggs clean with dental floss and people pretended that was witchcraft. It's not a living, just a side hustle that gets me free dessert sometimes. I always dreamed someone important would DM me an invite to something underground and exclusive. You know those secret supper clubs that pop up in movies? The ones where the address is a riddle and you knock a certain way? I wanted that. I got it. The message came late on a Wednesday when I was stressing over rent and arguing with myself about whether boxed mac and cheese counted as dinner. It was from a handle I didn't recognize. At Lantern Kitchen. No posts. No follower count. The profile pic was a plain black circle with a tiny white slash through the middle, like a candle flame upside down. "Your palate seems honest," the message read. "Would you be interested in a private dining event Friday night? No photos allowed during service. One guest only. Reply with a candle emoji if yes. If this sounds like the kind of thing you should ignore, you're smarter than me." I stared at it a minute, then checked if any of my blogger friends had gotten the same thing. Group chat said no. That cinched it. I sent the candle. Instant reply. "Thank you. A car will pick you up at 7:40 p.m. Dress comfortably, closed-toe shoes. Don't eat beforehand." As if. I showed my roommate Tess, because we show each other everything. She asked if I was sure it wasn't a scam. I said I'd turn my location on. She made me promise to text if at any point the vibes went weird. If you don't have a friend like that, get one. It didn't save me, but it helped me understand when to run. Friday rolled around, and I did what I always do when I feel out of my depth. I overdressed. Not fancy, just put together. Black jeans, plain tee, jacket that looks cooler than I am. I put on the good sneakers I only wear indoors. The car that showed up wasn't a town car or a limo like in movies. It was a regular old silver Prius with a little pine tree air freshener. The driver said my name without asking, which was either professional or creepy. He had a hat pulled low and a thermos in the cup holder. He didn't make small talk. I tried and got one-word answers. I sent Tess a pin and a selfie with my seatbelt on to prove I was doing at least one responsible thing. We drove out of my neighborhood, past the places that still have neon signs, past the places that don't bother, onto a stretch of warehouses that always smell like hot metal. The car turned down a side street with bad potholes and better graffiti. We stopped beside a building with no windows facing the road. The only light was a single bulb above a red metal door. I've seen butcher shops friendlier than that door. The driver didn't get out. He just said, "They'll meet you," and looked down at his phone like I didn't exist. The door opened before I could knock. A woman stood there with a clipboard. Late 30s maybe. Brown hair pinned back. Clear eyes. Not smiling, but not unfriendly. She said my name again and I nodded like I'd earned it. She waved a wand around my bag like I was going through airport security, then took the bag and my phone and slid both into a numbered locker. The lockers were built into the wall like post office boxes. "No photography," she said. "You'll get this back at the end." I hesitated and she added, "If you want to leave at any point, tell any staff member and we'll bring your phone to you right away." That sounded like someone had a lawyer. I reached for the little printed ticket with my locker number, and she didn't hand it over. "We'll keep it safe," she said, and her voice had that calm tone I use on my niece when she's touching a stove. For some reason, giving them my phone felt like stepping into deep water. But I'm stubborn. I tell myself I'm adventurous to cover that up. I stepped through the door. Inside was a short hallway painted the color of egg cartons. No art, no decor, just a clean smell like citrus oil and something else I couldn't name yet. The woman with the clipboard led me to another door. this one gray with a little metal plaque beside it. Lantern. She opened it and gestured me in like she was inviting me to confess. The room beyond was beautiful in the least flashy way possible. 12 seats around a thick wooden table that looked like it had started its life as a tree that took its time. No tablecloth, no nonsense. The walls were hung with rough linen. The lighting was soft and indirect, like every light source was behind a shade. There was a shelf with a few cookbooks I recognized and a few I didn't, worn from being handled. The kitchen was open at the far end. A big island, a few burners, a walk-in fridge with a cloudy glass door. A man stood there in chef whites so plain they might have been lab clothes. He wasn't playing the usual game chefs play where they look up and smirk and make you feel like you've been caught being uncool. He was wiping down a knife like he loved it. If you've ever gone to one of those chef's counter nights, you know the drill. We all smile politely at each other and pretend we didn't dress for it. There were 10 other people already seated, and 2 empty chairs. One beside a woman in a gray sweater with a neat bob, and one at the far end near a guy in a suit that looked expensive, but not the right kind of expensive for food. The clipboard woman steered me to the chair by the woman in the gray sweater. "I'm Mara," Gray Sweater said, offering her hand. Her nails were short. She had a wedding ring. "Welcome." "Thanks," I said. I almost said my handle. I caught myself. "I'm Eli." The chef set the knife down and looked at us like a teacher about to start class. There's a kind of silence that means everyone is pretending to be chill. He let it hang just a hair too long, then said, "Thank you for joining us. My name is Rourke. This is Lantern. We serve in courses. We'll tell you exactly what you're eating. If you need to stop at any time, raise your hand, and we'll take care of you." People nodded. A couple of us laughed, because it sounded like kindergarten. Rourke didn't smile. He snapped, or maybe just tapped, and 2 servers appeared from nowhere with carafes of water and small tumblers. No wine, no pairings. The water tasted faintly of something floral I couldn't place. It made my tongue feel awake. "Tonight's theme is gratitude," Rourke said. "You owe the people who fed you." He said it like a truism. He held our gaze for that beat too long again, then said, "Let's begin. Course 1 was bread. That sounds like nothing, but this bread was the kind that makes you forget your own name. Crust like glass, center with those big glossy holes that take years to figure out. Steam that smelled like butter before the butter hit it. The butter itself was whipped with something that made it savory beyond salt. People went quiet in the way good bread can make you quiet. We tore and passed and murmured. Beside me, Mara made a small sound. Across from me, Suit closed his eyes like he was flirting with the bread. I eat a lot of bread. I didn't know bread could taste like that. It was sour in a way that wasn't citric, deep, tangy, alive. The butter had a mineral edge like rain on hot pavement. After the bread, there was a bowl with greens I recognized as amaranth, dressed simply enough that the pepper bite had room to move around. A server poured a clear broth at the table that smelled like smoke and something sweet. I was too busy trying to name the flavors to be suspicious. If you're looking for the moment where I should have recognized the theme and left, it wasn't the bread or the broth. It came in the third course, 2 little ravioli in a shallow pool of oil. Rourke set them down himself. He told us the pasta was hand-laminated semolina, rolled thin enough to see shadows through it. He said the filling was cheek. No animal specified. Everyone nodded because we've all eaten pork cheek or beef cheek. That's a normal fancy thing. Mara asked. From where? In a tone of voice I couldn't read. The face, he said, not missing a beat. It's where the muscle works all day. Fatty, gelatinous. Melt in your mouth. He looked at her, then at me, like he was watching for something. I took a bite because I'm suggestible, and because I'm rude when hungry. The filling was incredibly tender. The oil had shaved black truffle in it. It tasted expensive. I felt the urge to look at my phone and write down tasting notes, like an obedient little content boy. My phone wasn't there. I took another bite. The fourth course came with a story. We all know someone who left, Rourke said, wiping his knife again. The knife was a habit. Maybe they moved away. Maybe they drifted. Maybe they died. We owe them. We carry them. He gestured to the servers, who placed little cast-iron dishes in front of us. Thin slices of something seared and topped with charred spring onion on a bed of white beans. The meat was cut on the bias into little coins. I could see the grain. I'm going to say something dumb. My tongue knew before my brain did. We are animals. We know what we know. The sear tasted like iron in a way steak does, yes. But there was a sweetness and a tug to it that made a part of me I don't like to think about lean forward. Lamb? Soot asked, playing expert. You know the type. Near enough, Rourke said. I looked at Mara. She wasn't eating. Her hands were in her lap. Her mouth was tight. She had that look you get when you've decided something and are trying to be brave about it. You've been here before, I said, low. Don't ask me how I knew. Her head turned like a camera finding a face. Yes, she said just as low. Don't drink the broth. She tipped her eyes at my water glass, which was mostly empty. I know, she said. It's fine. I'm only saying for later. Later when? She didn't answer. She picked up her fork and set it down again. We all give to the pot, Rourke said, like he'd heard us. He probably hadn't. He was plating something that looked like it had been carved from a roasted vegetable but wasn't. All of you have already given, in a way. The registry is thorough. That got a prickle going up my back. I thought of my phone in the locker, of how easily my handle ties to my real name if you try even a little, of how much of my life I've posted without thinking. We're not trying to scare you, he added, seeing a ripple in the room. We're reminding you where you live. The city feeds and forgets. We're not in the forgetting business. Course 5 was a small tart. The crust was delicate, the filling custardy with a saline pop like sea urchin. On top was a single translucent slice of something that looked like it should be apple. It wasn't. It folded over my tongue like paper dissolving. I wanted 10 more tarts. I also wanted to go home. Mara's hand brushed the side of my chair like she was grounding herself. I realized then that her wedding ring had a black band. Mourning? Fashion? I didn't know. Where did you hear about this? I asked. Because my brain is a mouse who asks questions when I'm scared. A neighbor, she said. When my mother... She stopped. It doesn't matter. It sounds like it matters. She took a breath that looked like it hurt. You ever feed someone dying? She asked, not really waiting for my answer. You spend all day trying to get them to swallow a spoonful of something. Custard, broth, anything. You wipe their mouth. You tell them it's okay. You start thinking about eating like it's a prayer and a war at the same time. She looked down at her plate. I thought a dinner might make me feel something else. Does it? Sometimes, she said, eyes back on Rourke. Not always the thing I want. That would have been a good time to stand up and say I had to pee and then sprint for the door. I didn't. The story was interesting, and the food was better than interesting. The part of me that wants to be first at everything wanted to see where this went. The part of me that is soft and stupid wanted to trust that the rules in my head were the rules in the room. Rourke laid down the 6th course like a magician revealing his trick. It was a pale tureen, speckled with green, set in a glossy aspic that wobbled when my neighbor breathed too hard. On top, a curl of pickled onion and a tiny daisy petal. Head cheese, he said, which made a couple of people wrinkle their noses. We waste nothing. The parts that do the thinking deserve respect. He paused on that last word. Respect. He said it like an oath. I took a bite and then another and then a third because it was perfect. There's no better way to say it. The texture was cool and yielding, the richness cut by vinegar, the herbs bright without being loud. I felt a warmth that wasn't from heat. That's when I realized what the broth had been doing. It wasn't drugs or anything conspiratorial. It was something simple, something cooks have known forever. A little heat, a little sugar, a little something to make your blood hum. We were being brought along, the way a crowd can be brought along, the way you can be warmed up enough to forget you were ever cold. You okay? Mara asked, barely moving her lips. I'm not sure, I said. What is this place? Her mouth did a small twist that wasn't a smile. Lantern, she said. Everything that name means. It shows you what's already there. It draws the moths. It burns. I started to sweat then, not in a when you eat ramen way. More of an oh. I see where this is going and I'm pretending I don't weigh. A server refilled my water. I didn't touch it. Rourke looked up, caught my eye, and nodded once, as if to say, You're doing fine. 7th course, he said, soft as a lullaby. This one is shared. He lifted a lid from a platter like he was performing a magic trick. What lay under it looked like a roast. The outside was mahogany, lacquered with something that smelled like caramelizing sugar and rendered fat. He set it on a board and carved slices clean and even, laying them side by side. The inside was pink in that blushing way cooking can be without being underdone. He sprinkled flaky salt open-handed, like blessing a baby. No one made a sound. People who had been humming and murmuring earlier were holding their forks like prayer hands. Rourke brought a slice to each of us. He said one word. Shoulder. I took mine because everyone else did. I laid it on the plate. I cut a piece off. I put it in my mouth. You want me to tell you it was foul and my body rejected it, so the moral of the story is obvious. I can't. It was astonishing. The fat had the depth of duck. The meat had the tenderness of slow-cooked pork. But the flavor wasn't pork. It was something deeper, more complicated, like a singer hitting an extra note. The salt made my mouth water in a way that made me feel like I was learning a new language. I ate the bite. I took another. Mara didn't touch hers. She watched me instead. I put my fork down when I realized that. I looked at her plate, then at mine, then at the chef. He was looking at the room like a man in love with his work. "What is it really?" I asked. The room didn't immediately hush for me. I'm not the main character here. My voice was just another sound, but people near me heard. Heads turned. The servers stopped pouring. Rourke's hands stilled. "What do you think it is?" he asked. And he didn't say it like a gotcha. He said it like a teacher giving you one more chance to show your work. In my head, a dozen clips from movies and true crime podcasts and creepypasta stories flared up. My brain did that panicked search for loopholes where maybe it's just clever. Maybe it's invasive species meat. Maybe it's lab-grown something. Maybe it's a trick. Then I looked at the knife he'd been wiping compulsively, and I thought of the registry comment, and I realized I wasn't going to be able to pretend my way out. "It's human," I said. Not loud, not triumphant, just true. "It's human meat." A sound went through the room like a shiver, not gasps, a collective adjustment, like everyone shifting their coat at the same time. Rourke's face didn't change. "It's a gift," he said. Suit laughed, short and mean. "What the hell does that mean?" he said, not asking. Rourke looked at him, then at me, then at the table as a whole. "We don't take," he said. "We don't hunt. We don't harm. We accept. Do you know how many people die every day in this city? Do you know how much gets burned or buried because we don't want to think about it? What if we thought about it? What if we asked in advance, when you leave, how do you want to feed us?" Mara spoke for the first time at full volume. "My mother signed," she said. Her voice was steady now, like someone who walked through a fire and found her shoes on the other side. Not for this place specifically, for the concept. She'd been on a transplant list for 6 months and hated the waiting, hated thinking of her body as a junkyard. She said, "When I'm done, use me. Burn me if you have to, but if you can make something good first, do it." She swallowed. "I found Lantern after. A neighbor told me. They knew the registry. They knew the rules. They offered me a seat for the first service that used what she gave." "She ate her mother," Suit said. "In that way, people say things when they think they're winning." "That's not what happens," Rourke said, calm as ever. "We don't serve family their family. We don't serve any dish with ownership. Consumables are anonymized and protected. You don't know who you're eating. The person you love doesn't become a menu item. They become a meal for strangers who needed to understand what gratitude tastes like." He nodded at Mara. "If you want to leave, we'll walk you out." "I'm staying," she said. I sat with my hands under my thighs to keep them from shaking. The food on my plate had shifted from astonishing to hot rock. The part of me that is a body didn't understand the moral part of me having a meltdown. It just knew this was nourishing. The part of me that is a mind reared back like a spooked horse. I stood up. I didn't say anything brave. I just got to my feet because my legs were going to do that regardless of what the rest of me thought. A server materialized. Not a clipboard lady. A man this time with a scar under his eye that looked like a comma. He gestured to the door. He had my phone in his hand even though I hadn't asked yet. The screen was dark. He didn't make me sign anything. "Thank you for coming," he said, as if I'd watched a very intense play and was leaving at intermission. "If you ever have questions, you can message the account again." I looked back at Mara. She was watching me without judgment. If anything, She looked relieved, like it was okay for someone to choose the other door. Rourke didn't try to stop me. He didn't grandstand. He didn't offer me a parting bite. He bowed his head the tiniest bit, like a conductor acknowledging a soloist. I thought that would be the end of it. You expect me to say I ran to the cops, had the whole place raided, did a podcast circuit with a dramatic title like I Ate Sin? That didn't happen. I left. The red door closed behind me like a book shutting. The air outside smelled like hot metal again and cut grass far away. I called Tess and said, "Pick me up," because suddenly being in the Prius seemed like too much agreement. While I waited, I scrolled Lantern's messages even though there was nothing there. I don't know what I expected. The menu, a contract, a threat. I was shaking so hard I almost dropped the phone. A text came from an unknown number. "Everything okay?" It was Mara. I hadn't given her my number. My brain tried to do the math on how she had it. Group chat stalking, the registry. The city is small in certain directions. "I don't know," I typed. Then, "Are you okay?" "Yes," she wrote. "I'm going to eat one bite for my mom and leave the rest." A pause. "You did the right thing for you." Tess's little Honda came around the corner like hero music. I got in and immediately started crying. I am not a crier. Tess did the thing where you put your hand on someone's arm and don't ask questions until they breathe right. I told her everything in one long, messy paragraph. She listened. At course 7, she pulled over, jaw clenched like she was going to punch the road. "What do we do?" she said. "Not do you want ice cream? Not do you want me to make a call? What do we do?" "I don't know," I said. I laughed weird and small. It was so good. That's the worst part. It was so good. We drove home and sat on the couch and watched a British baking show, because no one ever gets eaten on those. I slept badly, dreamt about cutting onions and crying for both reasons. In the morning, I woke up with this clear, cold certainty that I had to do something. Not call the cops. Not yet. I don't have a reason for that makes me look good. I thought of Mara. I thought of Rourke saying gift without making it gross. I thought of how many bodies burn every day while their families say it's what the person would have wanted, and no one interrogates that. I thought about how my uncle had willed his corneas, and the new guy who got them cried when he saw his kid for the first time. I thought about whether food counts as seeing. I messaged Lantern. "Is what you're doing legal?" I wrote. "No hello. I wasn't that person anymore." They replied quickly. "We operate within existing frameworks for body donation to science and research." That was a sentence a lawyer wrote. "We adhere to all consent requirements. We work with families." "What about the guests?" I wrote. "What about not telling them before they put it in their mouths?" I didn't say I was already doing the internet thing where you distance yourself syntactically. "We told you," they wrote. "You heard. Some here earlier, some later. Everyone chooses. We walk anyone who wants to leave out. We don't lock the door." "Do you feed family their family?" I asked, because Suit's line had stuck to me like gum. "No," they wrote. "That would be a cruel trick." Then, "We're not predators. We're a kitchen." I wanted to write a savage thread and watch the quote tweets do their bonfire. I wanted to DM 3 journalists I follow who do long reads about weird corners of the food world. I wanted to go back with a hidden camera. I wanted to be righteous. I wanted to be interesting. What I did instead was sit on my floor and stare at my hands and wonder why I'd eaten 2 bites after I knew. Because it was food. Because it was astonishing. Because part of me is a body and bodies are simple, and I'm not exempt from that. You can judge me. I do. I also understand it in a way I didn't want to. 2 weeks later, I went back. Don't skip ahead to the lecture. I know how it sounds. I didn't go for fun. I didn't go to feel special. A kid from my building, 13, skateboard in the hallway, a lot of scabs, got hit by a car right in front of the deli on the corner. He died on impact. The driver ran. I didn't know the kid's family, but the building did. People brought those sad little tin-foil trays with baked ziti. Someone taped slow down signs to the light poles. I went to the vigil because the city works like that. You show up even if you didn't know him, because someone you love will need you to show up someday too. The kid's mom said, "I don't know what to do with all this." She meant the grief. She also meant the food. Her mother, Grandma Tiny Steel Hair, said, "We'll feed the people he kept safe every day on that sidewalk by spotting them potholes." He did that for me. She was crying and bossing and making sense. Then she looked at the sky like she was mad at it and said, "He would have wanted to help someone last time too." It was the kind of thing people say when they're drowning. It hit me anyway. The next morning I messaged Lantern. "If a minor," I didn't finish the sentence. "No," they wrote. "Never." Good. Good. Then, adult only with documented consent prior to death and family briefing after, they added, because lawyers can't help themselves. I asked if I could sit in the kitchen next time and not eat. They said yes. "But you might smell it," they wrote. "We can't turn that off." I thought I was prepared. I wore clothes that wouldn't make noise when I moved. I tied my hair back. I stood by the walk-in and trying to shrink. Rourke didn't make eye contact like last time. He looked busy in a way that felt like kindness. The servers slid around me like they'd memorized my outline. The room filled with people who didn't know me, and a few who did. A tattoo artist from a shop 2 blocks from my place. The old man who sells produce from the back of his truck on Saturdays. Mara wasn't there. I watched. Bread, greens, broth. The whole arc like a piece of music you think you don't know until the chorus lands and you keep time with your foot. When the 7th course came, no one said anything. Rourke didn't say, "Shoulder." He said, "From a good man who built porches and laughed so hard he cried and would have rolled his eyes at the fuss." The room breathed differently. People took a bite. I didn't. I told you that because I need you to understand. I didn't. I didn't want to know if it was astonishing again. That felt like a line I could draw and keep. The smell came anyway. Sweet, iron, something like maple, something like rain. I felt my stomach go 2 directions at once. After service, when the remaining slices were packed for staff meal and the board wiped, Rourke said, "Will you help jar the stock?" It wasn't a question as much as a respectful instruction. I said yes. We ladled golden liquid into sterilized jars and twisted the lids on. Each jar got a small label with a date and a number. Numbers, not names. "What happens to these?" I said. I already knew. I needed him to say it. "We give them out," he said. to people who cooked for the family, to anyone who fed the block, to the shelter down the street. They never know. They just make soup and feed someone else. He turned a jar in his hands like it was a snow globe. You owe the people who fed you, he said, the same line as my first night. It doesn't end when you die. We are all eating each other, metaphorically, every day. We just don't admit it. He set the jar down. We admit it. That's the difference. I went home with the smell in my hair. Tess sniffed me and said, "You okay?" I said, "Define okay." And we watched another baking show. I dreamed of jars knocking together softly in the back of a car. This is the part where I tell you about the call. 3 months later, an unknown number. I don't pick up unknowns, but I was procrastinating and my thumbs did a democracy. It was Mara. "My father died," she said without preamble. Not unexpected. "It's fine." Her voice did a thing that wasn't fine. They asked if I wanted to be at service. I think I do. I don't want to go alone. I could have said no. I considered it. I looked at Tess, who was doing a crossword, and she raised her eyebrows at me. She doesn't tell me what to do. She just reminds me I'm a person who can decide. "I'll go," I said. That service was gentler than the first, or I was calmer. Mara held my hand under the table once. Rourke did the courses like a man doing a thing he believes is good. The room had more older people that time. Women in cardigans, men with those soft shoes that look like clouds. It was less performative, more like a wake, which is what it was when you stripped the plates away. People told stories between bites. He taught me to ride a bike. He cheated at cards. He never locked his door. When the roast came, Mara took one bite and cried quietly, and then set her fork down. No one circled, no one comforted, no one made a scene. They let the crying belong to her for a minute. I didn't eat. I feel like I need to say that again, mostly for me. I didn't eat. I don't say that to be good. I say it because lines matter when the ground is moving. Afterward, in the hallway with the lockers, clipboard woman pressed a cool cloth to Mara's wrist. "Are you okay to get home?" she asked. Mara nodded once. "Do you want to take anything?" she added, meaning jars. Mara shook her head and said, "Not this time." Clipboard squeezed her hand. "You keep showing up," she said to me later, when Mara had gone and I was pretending to study the framed certificate on the wall that just said, "Thank you for your generosity," with no issuing body. Why? I told her the only true thing I had. "Because I can't unknow it," I said. "Because I feel like if I look away, I'm letting myself off the hook too easy." I hesitated. Because part of me wants to call the cops, and the other part of me wants to believe this is actually kinder than what we do now. And I don't know how to live with those two parts unless I keep standing in rooms where they have to argue. She looked at me a long time. "We're going to get caught someday," she said, not afraid, just factual. "Or we'll stop voluntarily because the world caught up to the idea, and now there's a line at a legal window. The nature of light is that you can't hide it forever." She tipped her head toward the door. "Until then, we'll keep doing it the careful way. Tell your roommate she's right to worry." I didn't say. "You have good friends," she said. "They're why you're alive. Try to be the same kind of friend. That's the only rule that matters." I didn't tell anyone. Not the podcasters, not the cops, not the group chat. I kept going about my life like a person who has seen a ghost and now has to buy groceries. On Sundays, I still buy herbs from the truck guy and pretend not to notice his hands. Sometimes a jar shows up on our building stoop with no label, just a date, and someone cooks soup with it and posts in the resident Slack about mystery stock, and people make guesses and no one says the word they're thinking. On cold nights, the air by the warehouse street smells like sugar and iron and rain. I turn my head and keep walking. I keep an apple in my bag when I go anywhere near it. It helps to bite something loud. You want a decision. You want me to say I picked a team. I don't have a ribbon for you to pin on. I have a stack of tiny choices I add up each day and hope they trend true. I still think about calling the cops. I open the Notes app and pretend I'm outlining an email to a reporter. I rehearse the line where I say, I was a guest at something unbelievable, and imagine the comments that call me a liar or a hero. Then I close the app and call my uncle to ask if he's up on his medical proxy paperwork, and if he's thought about what he wants for his remains. And he says, "You got weird lately?" And I say, "Yeah." And he says, "Okay, I want to feed my garden." And that feels like a thing I can carry. Once, I asked Rourke a question I knew would make me dislike him. "Have you ever taken without consent?" I said. If he lied, I was done. If he told the truth the wrong way, I was done. He looked at me like a man who knows knives better than hearts. "No," he said. He didn't do the pretend shock face. He didn't clutch pearls that weren't there. And if anyone came to my door with that in their mind, we'd be done. The point is, the gift. Without that, it's just violence. We're not in the violence business. He scrubbed a pot while he said it, like it took effort to say it clean. I know that doesn't make you feel better. It shouldn't. Feelings aren't the point. I wish I could take you into the walk-in and show you how careful it is. That sentence sounds monstrous. I know. It's rows of labeled packages like a medical freezer, not a butcher. It's numbers and dates and forms. It's cold in a way that cleans your brain. Rourke touches nothing without gloves. The servers write more than they speak. Someone told me they rotate staff, so no one is only ever the person who touches the 7th course. No one gets good at it. They don't let you. One night, late, after a service where no one left, and that fact scared me more than anything, I asked Mara if she was going to sign the registry herself. We were sitting on the curb sharing a gas station coffee because nothing makes sense anymore. "Yes," she said, staring at the dark street. "If I die unexpected, cremate me. If I die slow enough to say goodbye, do this. It's the only dinner I've ever had that feels like the truth." You don't think it's, I don't know, a trick? "Everything is a trick," she said, almost laughing. "Weddings are tricks. Funerals are tricks. Christmas is a trick we do to make winter feel less like death. This one has less lying in it than most." She nudged my knee with her knee. "You never ate again after you knew?" "No." "That's your line," she said. "Keep it. It's good to have lines. We're friends now. Not best friends. Not movie friends. The kind of friends who send each other photos of weird birds on the fire escape and check in when the weather gets gross. The kind of friends who know a thing about each other no one else does, and keep it like a coin in the pocket. Once, when a food truck guy tried to upsell me on bone marrow like he'd invented it, I laughed a little too hard and had to text her to get my face right again. Sometimes I cook. I can't do broth for a lot of people, but I bake bread. Tess calls it grief bread, which is rude and accurate. It calms me. The smell is the part of that night that doesn't scare me. Flour, water, salt, time, heat. I bring loaves to the building's laundry room and leave them on top of the machines with a note. Take what you need. People write thanks in different languages on receipt paper. It makes me feel like a person who contributes. One afternoon, the kid from the second floor, loud, sweet, a mortal enemy of headphones, asked me if I ever go to that secret place. He didn't say how he knew. Maybe he saw me get out of the Prius while taking out trash. Maybe he follows my account too closely and caught me soft launching a crisis. Maybe Lantern isn't as secret as it thinks, and the city is an organism with pores. I don't eat there, I said carefully. Sometimes I help do dishes. That's gross, he said cheerfully. My mom says it's a cult. Your mom is smart, I said. Also, it's a kitchen. What do they cook? He said, like asking what music a band plays. Complicated things, I said. Not always the complicated you think. He nodded like that was acceptable. Want to try my skateboard? He added, because kids are exactly what's right with the world. Absolutely not, I said, because I know my ankles. He laughed and rolled away, and I had this surge of relief so big, it made me sit down on the stoop and breathe like I'd run. There is still sweetness anywhere people teach each other dumb little tricks on concrete. You can think I'm awful. That's fine. You can think Lantern is worse. I won't argue. I won't try to convince you that eating with consent is the same as love. I don't believe that either. I can only tell you what I saw and what I keep seeing whenever I close my eyes in a quiet room. A dozen people around a table, eating carefully, some of them crying, some of them laughing, all of them being honest for once about what it means to live off each other. A chef who looked tired and devout, a woman who learned a new way to say goodbye, a jar cooling on a counter, catching the light. It's not a horror movie with monsters hiding in the walls. It's a horror because it refuses to hide the thing you've already been doing your whole life, taking. It asks you to give back, and that's the part that hurts. If you get an invite, you'll do what you do. Maybe you'll block the account and eat vegetables for a month and feel virtuous, and I hope that works. Maybe you'll go and not realize until bite 7, and then you'll stand up like I did and leave. And that will be your line forever, and it will be a good one. Maybe you'll stay, and you'll cry for someone you loved, and afterward you'll go home and sleep better than you have in months. I'm not the judge of that. I'm just the friend who sits on your couch and tells you the one honest thing I've got, which is this: your body will understand the food faster than your mind understands the story. Decide which one you want to be boss before you go. Decide what you owe the people who fed you. Decide what you want done with what's left of you when the story ends. Lantern will be there for now, in that warehouse with the red door and the single bulb, with the clipboard and the knife and the quiet. It's not hunting. It's waiting. It's a mirror you walk toward. If you don't like what you see, turn away. If you see something you recognize, keep walking and keep your eyes open. Either way, eat before you go. Or don't. That's a different kind of line. I learned mine the hard way. I learned it with bread so good it broke my heart, and a roast I still taste when it rains. I haven't told my dad. He keeps asking me when I'm going to do a real job, and I say soon, and we both know that's a lie. I haven't told my mom. She would sign the registry and then make a casserole and tell me to be brave. I haven't told the internet. I'm telling you because this doesn't feel like an internet thing. It feels like a porch thing. Two people sitting close, passing a cup, not quite looking at each other in case their eyes agree too much. If you ask me later what I said, I'll probably lie to protect myself from the person I was when I first took the candle emoji too seriously. But right now, I'll be plain. It's a cannibal restaurant. It only serves people who ask to be served. It feeds strangers. It doesn't feel like a crime when you're in it. It feels like a confession. It feels like standing outside on a cold night and smelling someone else's dinner and wanting it, even though you just ate. It feels like the truth about how we live closer to each other than we admit. It scared me in a way I didn't know food could. It made me kinder for a bit. It made me hate myself. It made me bake bread and leave it in laundry rooms like a raccoon wiggles gifts through the bars of a crate. If you go, don't wear white. Don't bring your phone if you can stand being with yourself for a couple hours. Don't drink all the broth. Sit next to someone who looks like they've already decided something. Ask for their name and then, gently, ask what they owe. When the seventh course comes, listen to your body. If it says no, get up. If it says yes, take the smallest bite. You will not forget it. If you sign the registry someday, tell someone. Make it a gift. If you don't, that is also a gift. To a person who won't have to carry what I'm carrying. Tess just texted to say the building Slack is arguing about the mystery stock again. Someone says it's the bones of urban legends. Someone says it's bouillon cubes and we're all idiots. Someone says it tastes like the sea and home at the same time. I'm going to go stir and not think too hard about what's dissolving. That's the trick of soup. It makes everything equal. It takes sharp edges and simmers them down so you can swallow. Sometimes that's exactly what you need. Sometimes it's the scariest thing in the world. I don't know which this is yet. I'm still deciding. One jar at a time.